Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to The Conversation. For those of you who don't know, my name is Day, and on this channel, we are committed to bringing the pro-life voice to Canadians across the country. Today, we have a very special speaker with us. Scott Hayward is the co-founder of RightNow, which is a political strategy pro-life organization that is committed to bringing effective change to our political landscape. There's a little bit of background. Scott Hayward was born and raised in a practicing Catholic home where the life issue was front and center. He comes from a family that helped run Liberals for Life Manitoba in the 1970s, and his grandparents were friends with Joe Borowski. Am I saying his name right?
There, you got it.
Excellent. Pro-life politics were ingrained into his life from an early age. From research, speeches at school, and prayerful witness, Scott has been involved from a very youthful age. After earning his chartered accountancy designation, Scott moved to Ontario to work full-time in the pro-life political movement in September 2015. And in January 2016, Scott and his colleague Alyssa Golub founded RightNow, which is Canada's political pro-life organization. So before we dive in any further, Scott, I have a few questions just about your personal experience and, I guess, pro-life career, so to speak. What got you involved in the pro-life movement and passionate about it, more so than, the average person?
Well, I was in high school at the time, and this is such a stupid story, but I really liked this girl and she didn't like me back. And I was walking home one day feeling sad for myself. I was like, you know what? I don't really have things that bad. So I really walked across town to the Crisis Pregnancy Center and I offered my help to just move boxes and baby clothes and formula and whatever else. And I just started kind of working because I was always, pro-life. It was something that was always a passion of mine. And that's how I got involved. And, through the years, whether it be going to, of course, a lot of us growing up pro-life to the rubber chicken dinners, which, we can discuss the efficacy of those, but and then going to the Legislative Assembly in Manitoba, the Marches for Life, and then, of course, being involved very politically. I became very involved in politics. I remember following day to day the 2000 general federal election, the general federal election in 2000, not the 2000s general federal election. And I was 10 years old at the time, so that dates me. And I kind of merged the two because, of course, the two naturally become involved with one another in my teens. And I've always been involved politically, always been involved with the pro-life movement. And then after my chartered accountancy designation, when I was earning it, I had met my now colleague, Alyssa, and she saw those two big passions in me. She worked for a political pro-life organization at the time, and she, no offense to any chartered accountants out there, or people getting their designation, but she saw that, especially this time of year around tax season, it didn't super love my job. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And so I decided, you know what, there was a job opportunity in Toronto to work full-time in the political pro-life movement. And so in my mid-20s, I put all my possessions in one vehicle because that's the possessions I had, and drove 2,500 kilometers across the country to downtown Toronto. And that's how I started working full-time in the pro-life movement. So there we are.
Oh, literally just dropped everything and moved.
That's right.
All right. And did you know at the time, did you have any idea where that was going to lead? Or was it kind of just flying blind, make it up as you go, walking on faith?
Like when I moved to Toronto?
When you packed everything in your car and you just...
Yeah, no, I had a feeling that this is what I am going to do. It's what I wanted to do. A lot of the stuff that I learned toward earning my chartered accountancy designation applies to what I do. A lot of Excel sheets, as you can imagine, in politics. And I love my job. I love my job in such in that I love the day-to-day activity. I hate my job in that I wish it didn't have to exist.
Yeah.
Before I took that position at the other pro-life organization that I worked at for a few months before we founded RightNow, I was offered a few different jobs as a CA or CPA as we're known now. One of them was like a dream job to be the controller of a golf course just west of the city, my hometown of Brandon. And the guy who I was going to take over from, who had been there for a number of years, he said, once you get the hang of it, you come in at 6 a.m, you're done before noon, and then you can golf for free for the rest of the day. So, and it paid way more than I make now. And that definitely made back then in the full-time political pro-life movement. But I figured this is what I was going to do. Let's be frank. In Canada, we have a really long ways to go. We have made strides since we started RightNow, but it will take probably my entire professional career to get us to a good enough position that I would feel, happy enough to walk away from it and definitely let other people who are younger, smarter, better looking than me take over. But I want to get in as good a position as we can before that. So that'll probably take my entire working career, would be my estimation.
Yeah, unfortunately, and obviously you know this, but this is for our viewers who might not be aware of this yet. Canada currently has absolutely no laws against abortion, no protections whatsoever in terms of gestation, in terms of reason for abortion. You can get an abortion third trimester, last week of pregnancy, for something as menial as I don't want a baby boy, right? So yeah, long way to go. With that in mind, and this kind of piggybacks to things that you have already covered a little bit, but just to expand a little bit more, what drove you to the politics side of things specifically?
Well, I was like I had mentioned earlier, and you said like I've always been involved and interested in the political process in Canada, and a big reason for that is I think if you want to see change in specific policies, you have to get involved in the political process. There's no other way around it. So when I was 14 years old, I purchased my first membership in a political party, and since then I've been involved in literally hundreds of campaigns, federally, provincially, municipally, right across Canada. Whether it be nominations, by-elections, general elections. It's just a big passion of mine. And like I said, the biggest passion is that because if you actually want to see some sort of change fairly instantaneously, that will require change in legislation or regulations to a certain act, you need to have a majority of people who agree with you in the House of Commons, in your legislative assembly, city council, whatever the case might be. And then you see it, and then it happens. And oftentimes it happens for quite some time and has some staying power. So when you apply that with a pro-life lens, that's why anyone who's listening to this podcast should be involved in the political process at least a little bit every electoral cycle.
Yeah, education can only carry us so far. We also need to have a political landscape that actually officially, legally recognizes the value of every single human life. So I guess with that in mind, we are currently in an election season. How has that been going for you guys?
Very busy, which is good. Business has been good. we have lots of pro-life candidates, winnable pro-life candidates. We have a number of them, a few dozen, around 30 or so, that are in really, really tight swing riding. So what we do as an organization is we go out there and we reach out to all the candidates for all the political parties, because we're nonpartisan, and we ask them to have a private conversation with us. And we ask them the same 7 questions we ask everybody. And from those 7 questions, we can determine A, is someone actually pro-life? B, do they intend to vote pro-life? And C, are they going to vote pro-life when either pressure publicly or internally within their political party that they want to represent comes upon them? And if they come out on the other side and they're answering those questions satisfactory to us, then we will help them for the nomination process. So some people might be wondering, like, how do these people get their names on a ballot representing different political parties? Well, there's more or less like a mini election in that riding prior to the actual election. So, the Conservative Party of Canada, the Liberal Party of Canada, the NDP, and all the other political parties, they will allow members of that political party that live in that riding to vote for a number of nomination contestants as to who will represent the party in that riding in the by-election or the general election. So we were involved with that with a few different political parties. And through that, for example, we have over 100, I think it's 103, if not a little bit more, pro-life Conservative Party of Canada candidates that, of course, we're supporting in 103 or so different ridings across the country. So once we get someone to win their nomination, and by that, we will, our job is to not only identify these people, but actually help them. We will go and we will build up a database of people, and we're always trying to build our database. So if you want to know who your pro-life candidate is in your riding, shameless plug, go to our website, www.itstartsrightnow.ca. I'm sure, Diane, you'll actually share that with people and join up. we don't really communicate a ton with our supporters, like maybe once a month or so, because we understand people get texts and emails all the time. But this time of year, you're getting the information that you need to make an informed decision, or if you want to go help out somebody, which makes a really big difference. So our job, is to build up a database of pro-lifers across the country, inform them of when these nominations are happening, encourage them to purchase a membership, or for example, for the Liberals, it doesn't cost anything, so just join the party so that they can vote for the pro-life nomination contestants. Once that person has won that nomination contest and represents the party, then we try to get them to actually win the riding, which is the process that we're in right now. We have a general federal election set for Monday, April 28th. We're recording this on Thursday. Is today Thursday? Today's Thursday. We don't know what day it is. We think it's Thursday. And so we will go to our database and say, hey, we have a pro-life candidate that's in a tight, winnable riding. Can you go out there and knock on doors? The candidate will provide all the training necessary, the app they need to use on your phone. Or if you live very far away and your pro-life candidate is going to win by a bajillion votes, or your pro-life candidate is going to lose by a bajillion, or you don't have a pro-life candidate, there's no sense in helping out a pro-life candidate in a riding where they don't have a shot, or where they're going to win by, 30 percentage points or something like that. So although we have a lot of people from across the country in ridings like that are making phone calls for pro-life candidates in tight swing ridings in other parts of the country. So that's what we've been up to. So working with a couple different other organizations that share our views and values, we're pushing, I don't think we'll quite make it, but we'll have close to 1,500 volunteers started across the country, knocking on doors, making phone calls, targeted to about 30 or so tight swing ridings where we have winnable pro-life candidates. And we will see what happens on Monday evening. All these contests are going to be very, very close.
Yeah.
Oftentimes in elections, it's what's called the air war. It's kind of the campaign of the central campaigns determine a lot of how the election is going to go, how seats are going to be won. But there are a few candidates where we're helping, where when you're knocking on doors, you're making those phone calls, those volunteers can help win an extra kind of 3 to 5 percentage points for a candidate. That might not sound like a lot, but I think there's going to be a number of people who are going to win their elections or lose their elections by a couple hundred votes come Monday night, whether they're pro-life or not. And that's where we can make a really big difference.
For sure. Yeah, I know in our riding, when we lost, we had a conservative pro-life candidate, and he lost only by a couple hundred just a few years back. So it doesn't take much. It does not take a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that you are a practicing Catholic. Your faith is very important to you. What encouragement would you give to Christians? Because I hear this a lot. We don't want to be too political, right? We want to focus on the faith, focus on the gospel. What encouragement would you give to Christians who are kind of in that space?
Right. Well, while you might not be interested in politics is definitely interested in you. So you have to get involved. There is no sitting on the benches in this fight. As an example, the previous iteration of the Liberal government under Justin Trudeau had a study from one of their departments looking at taking away the charitable status for organizations that support things that they don't support, whether it be abortion or trans issues or things of this nature. So that includes probably the vast majority of Christian congregations and dioceses and eparchies. It would include schools, it would include hospitals, it would include daycares, it would include old folks' homes, it would include things like prison ministries and food banks. It would include a whole swath of things. And it wouldn't just be against Christians specifically. Think of, there are many Muslim sects where they share these sorts of views and values, and Sikhs and Hindus and Orthodox Jews. So it affects a number of people across the country. So you might say, well, we don't want to get involved too politically. We'll just pray about it. And I've come across this law and asked people like, well, what exactly you're praying for? Well, I'm praying that, that this candidate gets in, and then God has favor on this candidate and this candidate wins. So, okay, that's a great thing to pray for. How do you think that these candidates win? Like, what do you think happens? Well, people need to get out to vote for them, and they need to find the voters. And I said, okay, yeah. How do you think they find the voters? Like, do you think there's one person that just goes around and finds 20,000 voters, or do you think they have a team? Oh yeah, of course they have a team. Well, next time you want to pray for that, go in front of the mirror and pray, because you're the answer to your prayers. So for any Christians out there, the letter or the epistle of St. James is always a great one to fall back on, faith and works. You actually have to go and do things as well. So as a practicing Catholic, of course, I believe in the efficacy of prayer. I've had it happen a number of times in my life personally. So I'm not downplaying that at all. But oftentimes we are the answer to our own prayers as well.
Yeah, it reminds me of a post I saw circulating. I think it was Facebook not too long ago. And it said, you can pray, but at some point David had to pick up a stone, right? So it's obviously there's power in prayer, and we are called to pray, but God also works alongside us, rather than, he's not the fairy godmother that we call at midnight sort of idea.
Yeah, exactly. Stay away from pumpkins.
Good advice. I know you guys at RightNow, you've shared a lot about the election and the political landscape. I've been following all of your stuff pretty closely. For our viewers who are maybe not as familiar, are you able to give like a very short summary of political landscape, where the parties stand, any important candidates that come to mind? Basically just like I know it's a lot to condense into a very short few sentences, but if you were to give your elevator pitch of the political landscape, what would it be?
Okay, so as of today, like a few days before the election, just looking at the polls, we have, the Liberals and Conservatives are fairly close at the national numbers, but you always got to kind of pop open the hood and take a peek underneath. And so when you look at where most of the seats are, places like Quebec, places like Ontario, places like British Columbia, the Liberals are either well ahead of the Conservatives, or in the case of Quebec, the Conservatives and the Bloc, or they're tied or ahead in BC. It's kind of hard to tell at this point. My point being is that, right now the Conservatives are kind of running up the leads in like rural Saskatchewan and rural Alberta, and that's great for those ridings, but that doesn't really translate to places like the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, or Metro Vancouver. So right now on the projections, the Liberals are projected to get about 190 seats, the Conservatives about 120. The Bloc, 15 to 20, the NDP, maybe a handful, 4 or 5, and the Greens might win 1. For this general federal election, with the representation order changes, so there's been extra seats added to the House of Commons because our population has grown. There are 343 seats in the House of Commons, so to win a majority, you need 172 seats. So the Liberals are projected to win a majority. Now, what do these people actually believe? So Mark Carney, the prime minister who came in to replace Justin Trudeau, won the Liberal leadership race, has come out as pro-abortion, though he doesn't seem as obsessed about it, I suppose, as Justin Trudeau did. He will bring it up from time to time, but he doesn't super talk about that. So the big question for us is, under Justin Trudeau, he said that as leader of the party, if a pro-lifer won a nomination race, and we were talking about that earlier, to represent the Liberals in a specific riding and they're pro-life, that he would instruct the executive director of the Liberal Party of Canada to not sign off on the nomination papers for that candidate. So under the Canada Elections Act, as per the amendments in the 1980s, each registered party of Elections Canada has an executive director. And the executive director actually has to sign on, hey, this person does represent the party. This person is going to be our candidate. So when they print the ballots, it'll say Hayward, Scott, and then Liberal, Conservative, whatever candidate I'm representing. So Justin Trudeau basically said, you can win the nomination, but we're not going to let you put the name Liberal beside you on the ballot. Mark Carney hasn't said that. So the big question for us is, did the Liberals go back to the situation like it was before Justin Trudeau became leader, where, yeah, maybe the party doesn't actually pursue any pro-life policy, or maybe is actually against pro-life policy, but they might have a handful in their caucus that, introduce pro-life bills or vote pro-life on certain bills, and that's all well and fine. They're not going to get kicked out or anything like that. Now, with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada, the Conservative Party of Canada in their official policy does have a line that says a Conservative government, so cabinet, will not introduce legislation or support, legislation to restrict abortion. So like you mentioned at the beginning, Canada is only 1 of 2 countries in the world where we have no law on abortion. It's neither legal or illegal. It's just silent. So de facto it's legal, though de jure it's silent. However, there are multiple instances within the Conservative Party of Canada policy document as passed by members at previous conventions, with things like not funding abortions overseas, being against assisted suicide in all cases, and especially not expanding it as it currently is. And that's liberal enough. As well as being against sex-selective abortion. So there are a variety of things that you can pick and choose from. It's a little bit contradictory. Pierre Poilievre has said as leader that he is pro-abortion. He said that during the leadership race, which is why we didn't support him. And that if he were to become prime minister, that he would guarantee that this would never happen, which is kind of interesting because under the Conservative Party of Canada policy declaration, the party always has free votes on matters of conscience. So you can either vote pro-life or pro-abortion. It's up to you as a Conservative member of Parliament. So that's interesting. He basically has the same policy as Justin Trudeau, more or less, just doesn't officially kick people out of the party who are pro-life. The NDP are officially pro-abortion, although a lot of them are actually quite strong on assisted suicide and are against the expansion of assisted suicide. And the entire caucus have voted against the expansion of assisted suicide to those with mental health challenges. So you have a bit of a mixed bag with that. You do have some historical figures within the NDP, especially for their provincial parties that were pro-life, like Joe Gorowski, for example. He was a pro-life NDP cabinet minister here in Manitoba. But that's been many, many years, decades at this point. So there is an expectation, and it is in their policy, that if you are an NDP member of caucus, federally at least, that you have to vote pro-abortion. But then again, party policies can always change, and hopefully we can do that with the NDP one day. So that's where things stand right now. Basically, all the major parties basically hold the same position on abortion, unfortunately. And the Liberals are projected to win a majority, and the Conservatives are projected to basically win the same amount of seats that they have right now. That being said, one final thing, there are a number, I think it's over 2/3, like it's pushing 3/4 of the current Conservative caucus has a 100% pro-life voting record. And I think that's pretty reflective of the party members, as well as, I would say, the party universe. So all the donors, volunteers, and people that are accessible to the party to vote for them. I would say the vast majority of them are, we would call, somewhere on the pro-life spectrum. They might describe themselves as pro-choice, but ooh, you know what? Late-term abortion, not for that. Sex-selective abortion, not for that. Pain capability, heartbeat, something like that. Oftentimes they're way more pro-life than they would kind of think of themselves to be. And so you have that tension within the Conservative Party of Canada right now. We have been making strides within that party, and we need to make strides in other political parties as well, but one thing at a time. And so, yeah, the next parliament will prove to be very interesting to see where the Conservatives are, how many more pro-life Conservatives would get elected, as well as how does Mark Carney treat any pro-lifers that may exist in his incoming caucus for the Liberals, and will it be any different than Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember when that first came up with the Liberal Party, where they implemented that policy that you couldn't become a member of the Liberal Party, you couldn't get the name stamped approval unless you were willing to commit to being pro-abortion. Honestly, it shocked me that didn't blow up in mainstream media, because it's such a violation of the concept of democracy that your vote and your allegiances can be controlled by somebody else. But I think it's just a commentary on our political landscape, social landscape, basically where Canada has gotten to, unfortunately, over the past several decades. No, regardless of who winds up getting however many seats, majority, minority government, can you briefly summarize the process of actually getting a pro-life bill passed into law, regardless of who should take the position of the government?
So it's like any other piece of legislation. The way legislation works in Canada is that it's introduced either in the Senate or the House of Commons. I'm speaking federally, of course. And then that's known as first reading. Then second reading is when there's actual debate on that piece of legislation. The mover will start off the debate, and the seconder as well. Then it goes back and forth. And then sometimes that same day, but oftentimes later on, especially if it's a private member's bill, so a bill not introduced by a member of cabinet, there will be a vote, a second reading vote. And should that legislation pass that second reading, it then goes to committee. So if it starts in the Senate, it goes to a Senate committee. If it starts in the House of Commons, it goes to a House committee. So at committee, you have witnesses, so regular Canadians that different members of the committee will bring forward to comment on the bill. the committee, which is reflective of the House of Commons. So, for example, if the Liberals have a majority in the House of Commons, they'll have a majority on the committee. The committee is usually made up of around 10 MPs or 10 senators, something like that. So then the committee will cross-examine the witnesses, they'll discuss it, and the committee might actually pass some proposed amendments to the legislation. And then that goes back to whatever house it originated from, whether it be the Senate or the House of Commons, for what's called third and final reading. So the whole House, whether it be the Senate or the House of Commons, will debate it, they'll vote on it. And if it passes in that house, it then goes to the other house. So if it passes in the Senate, it goes to the House of Commons and vice versa. The same exact process happens again in either house. And then once it passes both houses of Parliament, it goes to the Governor General, who will sign it into law. And then royal assent is literally read into law by the Governor General at a certain date. And then that is when it becomes law, and then it becomes in effect. So that's how any legislation is introduced and passed and becomes statute in Canada, as with most Westminster parliamentary democracies. And that's what we're trying to do. So right now, we're focused on electing a pro-life majority to the House of Commons, whether it be, doesn't matter if they're Liberals or Conservatives or whatever, so as long as they're pro-life. And that way, when a piece of legislation is introduced to restrict abortion or to further reduce let's say the eligibility for assisted suicide, if not eliminate entirely, we have enough members of Parliament in the House of Commons to have a majority, so they can actually be passed and go to committee, come out of committee, and pass the House of Commons. The Senate is a different question because, of course, senators are not elected; they are appointed by the Governor General on recommendation from the Prime Minister at the time. So Justin Trudeau, of the 105 senators, I think he's appointed 80. So you have to retire from the Senate once you hit 75. So one thing that we have done as an organization was work with other pro-life organizations to come up with proposed lists of senators who are obviously pro-life, and you have to be at least 35 years old as well, and owned $5,000 of real property. This is what's in the Constitution in the province or territory that you're representing. So we've come up with a list of those people. They're basically all under 40 because we want them to be there for a good long time. And the other thing too is legislation could be challenged, right, in the court of law. And in Canada, with the way that the British North America Act is written and as amended in 1982 with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, certain laws can be struck down and basically told that they're null and void by the Supreme Court if it violates certain, if they find it violates certain aspects of the Charter. So there's various ways you can treat that. Number one, obviously, appoint solid justices. So there's 1,178 federally appointed justices across Canada. And we, again, as an organization, worked with others to come up with lists of pro-life lawyers. Again, justices have to the age of 75. So lawyers who have been called to the bar for pro-life lawyers who have been called to the bar for at least 10 years and that are young. So they can be appointed to the bench forever, more or less, and then work their way up the system to, courts of appeal, the Supreme Court, the Federal Tax Court, things like this. There's also a provision in the British North America Act, Section 33, where if the court rules a certain way, Parliament or a legislative assembly can make that call notwithstanding. So they'll just pass a motion saying, actually, this ruling by the court has no standing, and we can ignore it, and that's constitutional, and it just be renewed every 5 years. And that just gives you time within 5 years to pass a new piece of legislation that could basically be the same thing, except for a few different things amended if you want, because if you don't want to keep renewing that notwithstanding clause. And then if that gets challenged, it has to spend all the years in the court system for that. So that's the way we have to get legislation passed. And also, importantly, that's the way it needs to be protected as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You actually answered my follow-up question, which was what are the strategies? So I guess my second final question for you, many voters, as I'm sure you're aware, they're conflicted heading into the polls. They want to vote in terms of their conscience. They want to vote for a party that is actively going to oppose abortion. However, we are in a bit of a two-party system. There's realistically only two people who even have a chance at becoming prime minister. And between those two, Pierre Poilievre seems to be the slightly better option. So they're kind of, stuck in a bit of a catch-22. How would you encourage these pro-life voters as they head to the polls?
Well, our policy for our organization is to always vote for the most winnable pro-life candidate in your riding, regardless of political party affiliation. So, you might really, really hate Mark Carney or really, really love Pierre Poilievre, but unless you live in the riding of Carleton or the riding of Nepean, they're not going to be on your ballot, right? In Canada, we do not elect the prime minister. The prime minister is selected by the House of Commons and must always have the confidence of the House of Commons. All we do in Canada is we elect our local member of parliament. So, right now, Pierre Poilievre has adopted the same position on abortion as Justin Trudeau. He's pro-abortion, radically so, emphatically so. But leaders come and go, right? Your pro-life conservative member of parliament, for example, there's a good chance that person preceded Pierre Poilievre as leader, and there's a really good chance come Monday that pro-life member of parliament locally for you will succeed and be there longer than Pierre as leader of the party. So, leaders come and go. So the only thing we can control is what's happening locally in our riding. So we always encourage people to vote for their most winnable local pro-life candidate. Now, that being said, if you have a local pro-life candidate that's going to win by a huge margin, maybe don't go and knock doors for that candidate. Maybe hop in the car and drive, 20 minutes, a half hour to another riding where there is a pro-life candidate that's in a dogfight, like that's in a 40-40 split with their opponent or something like that, and go knock on doors or make phone calls for that candidate, because your time investment for that candidate is going to have a higher return on investment, because we can get 2 pro-life candidates as opposed to that one losing that close fight by a couple hundred votes because you spent your time with the pro-life candidate that used this huge margin and you just increased that one's margin. So for voting recommendation, we always recommend people vote pro-life, even if your most winnable pro-life candidate is only going to win by like 2%. We will never, ever recommend to someone vote pro-abortion or for a person who we don't know when we know that there is a pro-life candidate there. And then, of course, to be very intelligent with the way that we want to invest our time in volunteering, which we all should do during a RIP period.
All right. Like I mentioned, I have one final question, but before we get to that one, we also had some students who wanted to contribute questions. They want to hear your perspective. Like you, they are very active in the political sphere, watching closely, and very interested in what's going to happen, especially over the next 4 years. So a question for you from Carmel in BC. She says, Canada is stacked both in population and in politics with a rabidly pro-choice view. This is true for both the main parties and many of the medium-sized parties. So what is the place of pro-life work in the political realm under these conditions if we know the odds are so low? I think you've already touched on this, but just to expand on that, if we kind of know we're fighting an uphill battle, what is the role of the pro-life political sphere?
I would first off love to know what a medium-sized party is and what the definition of that and the parameters are. I've never heard that before, but maybe I'm just too new at this, or maybe I don't know enough, and I'm totally open to that. But that's really fascinating. I would love for that person to follow up with me. That's really funny. Medium-sized party. Yeah. What is a medium-sized party, and how does one become a medium-sized party? Like when do you graduate from a medium-sized party, and is there a downgrade from being a medium-sized party to a small party? Anyway, don't have to focus on that. Although I'm going forward. So what can we do? Well, yeah. So do things look grim? Yes and no. So Dr. Callum Miller, who is a pro-life activist and works with politicians in the United Kingdom and Westminster, came over a couple of years ago to work with some pro-life members of parliament in Canada. And him and I had a couple of drinks together off to the side in Ottawa. And he was saying, like, man, I wish we were in the position you were in. You have so many pro-life members of parliament, and they don't mind saying it, and they vote that way, and they can basically do what they want. And it's really hard for the party to come down on them, and although the party does try to do that, including under Pierre. And I wish we had that. So in other countries, we're actually in an enviable position compared to other countries like Poland. We have a way to go, but you have to do it. Oh, it's hard, so I'm not going to do it. I need to lose weight, but I'm just going to keep eating the way I'm eating, and I'm not going to hit the gym. Unless you do it, it's not going to change. And it doesn't take very much to do that change, right? So we were talking about those really tight ridings where you have a pro-life candidate running where it's, like a 40-40 split. you find 20 pro-lifers to go knock on doors in that riding, one shift a week for a 6-week campaign. On average, you will find probably close to 1,000 extra voters for that candidate just by doing that. It doesn't take very much. So bit by bit, you build up. You have to make sure that you're involved in the political process. You're sitting maybe on your EDA board of directors. You're going to political party conventions to vote for pro-life policies, to vote for amendments to the party constitution to make it easier for pro-lifers to get involved, especially in the nomination process, vote in leadership races, maybe even run yourself. So it doesn't take very much. Like when you think about the Liberal Party of Canada, right? You had about 150,000 people who joined the Liberal Party as members for free over like a 2 or 3 week window. And they elected by huge margins Mark Carney to be their leader, who then became prime minister. That's 150,000 people out of 40 million. So we're talking very, very minuscule numbers. That's a certain percentage to actually get the things that we want. The other thing too that works for us is that we have a super majority of Canadians that believe in the policies that we're putting forward. So you have 84% of Canadians, including 83% in places like Quebec, that support legally restricting sex-selective abortion. You have 70% of Canadians that support legally restricting, late-term abortion. So it's just getting involved in the political process to provide some courage to a lot of people in a variety of political parties to actually introduce, speak to, and vote for legislation that a super majority of Canadians believe in.
Yeah, so it's not that people don't agree. It's kind of almost this divide between public opinion and the political realm and how things are.
Yeah, like to get into super nitty gritty of it, the problem at the end of the day is that you have full-time staffers working at Liberal Party HQ and Conservative Party HQ that come from either they're born and raised in downtown Ottawa, they're born and raised in like downtown Toronto. So like their idea of the GTA is from the lake to St. Clair, from like Bathurst to the Don, when in reality the GTA includes places like Oakville and Ajax and Brampton. And the people that live in those areas, particularly amongst ethno-religious communities, do not share the same values as someone who lives on St. Clair West or on Bloor or something like that. So we have a really, really big disconnect between the full-time party staffers, particularly in the Conservative Party of Canada, versus where their voter universe and their voter base is at on these questions.
Yeah. And I guess to follow up on that, on two kind of levels, how can the other arms of the pro-life movement help with the political side of things? And how do we successfully bridge that gap in practice?
Bridge the gap between the political arms and the other ones?
That as well as like the voters and their representatives. Like you were saying, that there's that disconnect there.
Okay. So the first question, to answer the first question on, how can all pro-lifers all across the different arms of the pro-life movement get involved in the political process, we need different arms of the pro-life movement, right? So we have NCLN, you guys are on campus. For the education arm, I think one of the best examples, not just in Canada, but in the Anglosphere, is the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, CCBR. I think they do some really amazing door-to-door work for conversion. I've gone conversion door knocking with them before and seen before my eyes people who start off 7 minutes ago being pro-abortion and then 7 minutes later literally being pro-life. Like they have it down to a T, they have it down to a science. And they've been and now that's starting to percolate in some of the polling data we've seen in the last few years, which is really great to see. So we need the different arms of the pro-life movement, including the political arm. I would say that at specific times, for example, like I'm a big believer that people should be have their name and contact information in a variety of different pro-life organization databases. So if you're an alumni of NCLN, you remain in that database because maybe when you've graduated, you're making a bit of money, you want to donate to them so that other people on campus that come after you can have a similar positive experience and be involved in the pro-life movement. Maybe you're in CCBR's database as well. So that way, when they say, hey, we're going conversion door knocking and we can do some teaching on that, you can do that, a few times a year and help them out. And then maybe you're in our database as well. So that, hey, in your riding, we're having a nomination. There's 3 people running for the Conservative nomination. 2 are pro-abortion, 1 is pro-life. Please purchase a membership to Conservative Party of Canada by the state and go to this nomination meeting at this date, time, and location to vote for this nomination contestant so they can be the candidate for this riding. And then a few years later, you might hear from us again saying, hey, remember that person that you voted for in the nomination? Well, now it's election time. Do you want to come out and knock on some doors? Do you want to drop off some flyers? Do you want to make some phone calls? Help this person get elected. And that's why we have close to 1,500 across the country engaged in about 30 ridings or so. A lot of those people who are engaged across the country, they're not knocking on doors, making phone calls for 4 years. They're doing it for basically 4 weeks, once every 4 years during election time. So I think that's how people from other arms of the political of the pro-life movement can get involved. Make sure that you're in our database, make sure that you're signed up, and that way when the time is come and the time is appropriate for you to get involved, you can get involved. One really great story about that is my colleague Alyssa went down to Niagara when Sam Osterhoff, who is a pro-life member of provincial parliament in Ontario. And when he ran for that nomination for the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, Alyssa went down and spoke with Niagara Against Abortion, which is kind of like the offshoot community group of CCBR down there. And they went conversion door knocking every Tuesday and Thursday. And she said, hey, for the next couple of weeks, can you take one of those nights and instead of doing conversion door knocking, go and knock on some doors. We'll provide, like a list and a map, and sell some memberships for Sam Osterhoff. And so they went to Smithville, and at the first night, they sold like 50 or 60 memberships for him for the nomination. And he ended up winning the nomination by, I think, 61 votes or something like that. So like, had we not been involved and got people to, for a little bit of time, switch their focus from education to politics for, once a week for 4 weeks during that 4-year cycle, then he would not have won that nomination. So I think that's one way to do it. In terms of how do you get your local representative to actually vote the way you want them to vote in your provincial legislature or in the House of Commons, there's 2 ways to approach it. There are carrots and sticks, right? So a carrot would be, if you're going to vote pro-life, then I'm going to come out and I'm going to knock on doors for you. I'm going to help fundraise money so that you have enough money to have a campaign office and pay for literature and all that type of stuff. I'm going to sit on your EDA board of directors and make sure that, everything's ran smoothly for you in the riding for the next 4 years. So you don't have to worry about fundraising or finding volunteers, that the EDA is active, and then that you're good to go. The stick, of course, is you don't have those things for me, and I'm going to take all those things and put them to someone else. And even if that someone else, let's say it's a PPC candidate or a Christian Heritage Party candidate, I don't care that they're only going to get a few thousand votes. Those are a few thousand votes that you're not going to get, and you're going to lose your job and you're going to lose your pension. So there are carrots and sticks. My encouragement, of course, is to always use the carrot before the stick, but sometimes we have to use a stick. That being said, when we do our interviews with candidates, we're a little bit different than some other pro-life organizations. So some other pro-life organizations, when they do their interviews before an election, before a nomination, they'll post the questions and the answers online. We don't do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, we find more people are willing to have a conversation with us so we can find more pro-lifers. And number two, we have a more upfront and honest conversation. I think they say things and share strategies with us that they otherwise wouldn't because it's not being published online. And I have had a few occasions where we have a conversation and the conversation goes well. And then we ask them, a tough question, like, well, not a tough question, but a tougher question, here's a proposed piece of legislation. Would you vote for this? And they kind of hum and haw, well, I don't really know. And we say, well, if you can't commit to that, we can't commit to you. Or, let's say, we have a piece of legislation coming forward and Pierre Poilievre is going to come down hard on you and say, if you're a member of parliament, like you can't vote this way. Are you going to listen to Pierre? Are you going to listen to your conscience? And some people say, well, I would probably get whipped by the party. And we say, I'm sorry, but then we can't support you. So we have more upfront and honest conversations. And through that, we have yet to have one person who went through our process, who told us they would vote pro-life, who has not voted pro-life because of that. So it's been a pretty good screening process. I anticipate that day will come. And then when it comes, and I do tell people this, I will make it my full-time job to ensure that they lose their job. But that's not the way I like to approach things. I'd rather find people who share our views and values and support them as best we can. And then once they do get elected and they have voted that way, to ensure that because they stuck their necks out for us, that we stick our necks out for them come election time. And it's been a pretty fruitful process. It doesn't come, I'm not going to say it's completely without, bumps along the road, but it's been very successful in that when we were founded in 2016, we had 40 people in the House of Commons that had a 100% pro-life voting record, and now we're pushing 90. So we've more than doubled it. We still have a ways to go to get to 172, but we're a lot closer to that number today than we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you anticipated the next question. Also from Joel, he was going to ask, how do you?
I'm like a party trick for you. You can just take me to NCLN parties and say, "Ask this man one question, and he'll answer the next 5."
Literally, yeah. He was going to say, how do you determine what candidates to support, and how do you weed out anyone who's just looking for votes? But you already answered his question there.
Good question.
The next question he had, you have answered a little bit, but I'm just looking for more details on this. He said he knows that you guys are active around elections, especially during the every 4 years. But what do you do in between election cycles? I presume part of that is, calling the candidates, getting their position, asking them those questions. But what else do you guys do?
Usually I go on trips for like 3 years in between, and then that's how I spend my time, on the beach or on the golf course. And then when the time comes, I just get back into it. The thing about it is that in Canada, unlike the United States, so in the United States, their municipal, state, so gubernatorial and federal elections are all on the same day every 2 years, right? It's always on the second Tuesday, of every November. In Canada, because we have responsible government, not representative government. It's not our government we're electing, it's His Majesty's government. It always must maintain the confidence of the House of Commons or the Legislative Assembly, which represents the subjects of the Canadian Crown, the citizens of the Canadian Crown. So there's a deep philosophical difference. And because of that, we don't have elections all on the same day, right? Governments fall, there's minority governments, different provinces have different legislation on when they're required to have their elections. Some have them in the spring, others have them in the autumn. So we are involved both at the federal level and the provincial level, and basically we're always in some sort of electoral cycle. Also, political parties in Canada, like most in Westminster parliamentary democracies, have a leader of the party that's elected by the local members, or primarily the local members, by the members of that political party. So there's leadership races we have to be wary of. Once we get someone elected to the House of Commons or a legislative assembly, let's say provincially, they need a staff. They need to fill an office of 5 or somewhere times up to 10 different people. So they're looking for people that share our views and values. So we're looking to, people, this is perfect actually. People listening to this podcast at NCLN who are about to graduate, or maybe you haven't graduated yet, you're interested in working in politics as a full-time job, let me know. Email me, scott@startsrightnow.ca. We have a list of people that we always send jobs out to about once a month or so for different, it could be a pro-life member of parliament. It could be just members of the Legislative Assembly locally. Like there's always jobs to be had. We're trying to fill those. There's also local internal party races that we're involved with, making sure that we have a majority of pro-lifers on EDA boards of directors for a variety of different political parties, both federally and provincially, making sure that we have a pro-grassroots, at the very least, if not pro-life majority, on the boards of directors for these federal and provincial parties. And of course, always building our database, because if we have a database of, just 3 people in the riding, can't really make a difference. But our goal is to have a database of roughly 1,000 people in every federal riding. That's kind of the magic number for us, because if we email 1,000 people, we're not going to get 1,000 door knockers. But if we email 1,000 people, we could probably get close to 100 door knockers. And that really does make a difference, especially in an election that's about to happen on Monday, where it's really, really tight in a number of ridings. So that's what we're doing all the time. That work never ends. There is no golf course. There is no beach. There is no crushing Miami Vices down in like the Caribbean or anything like that. It is go, 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 go constantly. Speaking of jobs, we're hoping that we can raise enough money going forward that we can start hiring people. So if you want to work in politics, but you always want to work for pro-lifers, you only want to work on pro-life issues, then RightNow is a really good organization to work for in that regard, because that's exactly what we do. You're multiplying, if you will, through working with us, all the different pro-lifers that hopefully we can get elected at the various levels in Canada.
Yeah, and like you said, that's more important even than getting a pro-life prime minister, because it's ultimately
that's right.
the support that they're going to have in their party.
The prime minister is one vote. The prime minister is only one vote of 343 in the House of Commons, assuming that the prime minister is in the House of Commons. Our current prime minister is not, though probably will be in a few days. And that's the beauty about Canada, is that prime ministers, unlike presidents, for example, in the United States, they do not have veto power. So, and they can't control what comes to the House of Commons to the floor or not. They can control what comes from their cabinet. But every member of parliament who's not a member of cabinet goes into a lottery system. And every few months or whatever, they choose 30 names out of that lottery system. And you have the opportunity at a specific point in time in the parliamentary calendar to introduce what's known as a private member's bill. It could be on anything you want. And there are parliamentary resources available, lawyers, historians, stuff like that, that will help you craft your legislation, translate into French as well, so both official languages of the Dominion. And a prime minister, no matter how pro-abortion that prime minister is, cannot control that. So that's why it's really, really important to get your most winnable pro-life candidate elected, because they can outlast a pro-abortion leader, and they can do a lot more damage than having a whole caucus of pro-abortionists and with a pro-life leader. I'd rather have it reverse.
Right, for sure. Better political strategy that way then.
I want both. I want it all. I'm pretty greedy that way.
Yeah, we can just get every member of parliament to be pro-life. That'd be
yes. Yeah, there you go.
So a combo question from Adam and Brendan in Ontario. You touched on this a little bit with the carrot and the stick analogy, but how do we actively ensure that social conservatives don't betray pro-life voters once they obtain power? Is there anything that you would add to the carrot and stick analogy that you use, or is that pretty well the main method?
Yeah, there's a specific ways to ensure that political parties within their party constitution have provisions so that automatically every electoral cycle, every single riding has an open nomination. So most political parties, if they have a member of parliament or a member of the legislative assembly from that riding, they will not have a nomination, because they want their MP or their MLA or MPP or whatever the case might be to focus on their job and not have to worry about keeping their job. But there's a certain level of accountability I like about, well, you kind of have to worry about keeping your job, and you have to be responsive to the people in your riding that you represent politically within the Conservative Party of Canada, the Liberal Party of Canada, where the case might be. So making sure that we go to convention to amend these rules in these different political parties, so that if someone tells us they're pro-life and then they vote pro-abortion, that they get unelected at the nomination level. You can also have EDA boards of directors. They're the ones that control the bank account that's going to be used for the re-election finances for a candidate. If your EDA is majority pro-life, and now you have a pro-abortion MP because they said they were pro-life, but they didn't vote that way, you can move that money out of that account and move it to other EDAs within the same political party, where maybe, you know, there's a pro-life candidate or there's a pro-life MP that's in a really tight riding. They can use that $50,000 or $500,000 or whatever the case might be. So there are a variety of things that we can do to make life a living hell for those people. But we haven't had to do it yet, thankfully. And I imagine the day will come, but I imagine that person, whoever that person is, won't last very long in the position when that day comes, and hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, especially considering pro-life voters tend to be very passionate. So I'm sure that turnover wouldn't take too long if that day were to come. Hopefully, Lord willing, it doesn't. But, you know, if it happens. Ezra in Ontario is wondering, how do the political and outreach sides of the pro-life movement complement each other?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
He's wondering, how do the political and outreach sides of the pro-life movement complement and support one another?
What does he mean by outreach? Sorry. Or what do you think he means by outreach? I'm just trying to think, like what's an example organization you think he's thinking of?
I would assume he's thinking more along the lines of like crisis pregnancy centers and mission organizations, that sort of idea.
Well, there has been in the recent past, crisis pregnancy centers have been targeted with bubble zone legislation. So that's legislation, for example, where they can't get their message across within a certain physical limit of a private abortion clinic or a hospital where abortions occur. Usually, it's like 50 meters or 150 meters. We see from the previous Liberal government under Justin Trudeau proposals to take away the charitable status, for example, of crisis pregnancy centers, that we rely on that for to issue charitable tax receipts. So again, it's one of those things where you might not be interested in politics, but politics is going to be interested in you because politics hates you. Generally in the Western world at this point, at least. And so it's important that we remain in communication with organizations like that to let them know that this is happening, that this is coming down the pike. Here are the different things you can do within the legal confines of being a registered charity with the Canada Revenue Agency. That's where the CPA stuff tends to kick in quite a bit, because there are things you can do politically as a charity in Canada. You can't do everything that we do. That's why we exist. But there are certain things you can do, and there are certain things we can do on their behalf as well. So that's how we would complement one another if we're thinking of a pastoral organization like a crisis pregnancy center.
Yeah, and that if we want to see their work continue, we have to make sure they have the legal protections to continue.
Precisely.
Okay, Adriana from Ontario asks, what are the plans for pro-life legislation after the election, particularly if Poilievre is elected?
Well, regardless of who's elected, it doesn't really matter between the two leaders because both have said that they're extremely pro-abortion. But that's not going to stop us from introducing legislation. So there's a few reasons why we like to introduce legislation in every parliament. Number one is to keep the conversation going in the public eye, because that's one of the best ways to do it, is to actually have legislation there. Number two, it's also to see who in parliament is going to vote what way. Because there are a number of people in the House of Commons or in the Legislative Assembly where we don't know where they stand on a variety of issues, and but they're forced to take a stand when it comes to voting on pro-life legislation. So even though we know that a piece of pro-life legislation might fail, we would still introduce it because we want those two things. We want the conversation to continue, as well as we want to see who the pro-abortionists are, because those are the people that we need to target and that we need to get rid of. And we'll target the weak ones first, right? Because it takes the least amount of effort, time, and resources to get those people out of there and to replace them with pro-lifers. So that's our plan going forward in terms of legislation. In order to actually pass legislation, I'll use the example right now of the House of Commons because we have the general federal election coming up in a few days. We need 172 pro-lifers. So like I said, we have about 83, 84, something like that right now, that are wanting to return to the House of Commons. So in one fell swoop, are we going to go from 84 pro-lifers to 172? No, it's going to take a number of electoral cycles. And I'm sure there'll be an electoral cycle in there, maybe even two, where we go back a bit. But it's one of those things where if we're taking 3 steps forward, 1 step back, you're still progressing in the right direction. And then until such time where we're close to, or we have that pro-life majority in the House of Commons, then we can get really serious about legislation, because it's not only at that point about introducing legislation that we think is going to pass second reading, it's getting our witnesses ready for committee, is making sure that we are pushing for the right type of members of parliament to be on those committees, is making sure that we have our comms ready to go for social media, for anything that needs to be printed out, for communicating with other aspects of our life movement, the general public, as well as making sure that our talking points with the politicians, as well as those who are speaking to the public, whether it be through paid advertising online, through TikTok videos, or through speaking with legacy media or independent media, making sure that talking points are down pat. And that we're communicating and marketing to the right people. For example, that we are getting interviews in religious newspapers, for example, with the Sixth in Brampton and Vancouver, Northeast Calgary, or Chinese evangelicals, Korean Presbyterians, any of the Eastern Catholics, particularly Copts from Egypt or Maronites from Lebanon, making sure that we're communicating with those organizations as well, those communities, because that is the super, super, super low-hanging fruit that's ripe for the picking for when the time comes. So depending on where we are in the House of Commons, depending where we are in the Legislative Assembly, that kind of determines what kind of resources we're going to put forward into legislation and what we actually want to get out of, like what's the actual outcome we were looking to get out of the legislation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you brought up the fact just even maintaining the conversation and keeping things going just through the legislation that is proposed, even if it doesn't go anywhere. I know when I've been on campus, that's been a really good conversation starter. People will come and, I don't even have to open the conversation. They'll come and they will just ask, what about this policy? What about this law? What about this parliamentarian who hates women? That sort of thing.
Right.
So it's really, really good conversation start, even just like amongst family and friends. It's a good way to get things moving in small circles. Peter from Ontario wants to know if you know how many CPC nominations were acclaimed this election.
Yes, there's been a really big problem within the Conservative Party of Canada because many, including pro-lifers, were, I would say, spiritually disqualified by the party in favor of people who typically were pro-abortion, but more likely that were favored by certain people in the party because they're close friends or they're lobbyists. So in terms of acclamations, I mean, it depends. Like a true acclamation where no one else is running for the nomination, probably fewer than 10. I wouldn't say fewer than 10 because you had a number in rural Quebec, or not rural Quebec, but like downtown Montreal, for example, as well as, the territories and things like that. So normally you're probably looking around like 50 to 70 that would be true acclamations. In terms of, we just got rid of these 4 other people that sold a bajillion memberships because we favored this one that sold 3. There were a number of those. The actual number, I don't know off the top of my head. It's definitely more than 25. And then with the Conservative Party of Canada, like most political parties, which I personally think is fine, once a writ is issued for a riding and the party does not have a candidate that's been nominated, it's the prerogative of the leader to make an appointment for that riding, which I think is fine because you have tight timelines with elections and it takes a lot of time and effort to actually have a proper nomination race, although you should. But within the context of a writ period of an election, it becomes quite difficult. That being said, there were a number of nominations that didn't happen with the Conservative Party of Canada because they were dragging that to the writ period so that once the writ period occurred, then they could just make their nomination. So there were a number of nominations that occurred during the writ period where you had like 5 people that together sold, let's say, like 5,000 memberships for the last 2 years running for that nomination, and then the party chose someone that wasn't even amongst those 5. That wasn't even a name that was being considered because, they helped out with Pierre's leadership race or are really good friends with people high up around Pierre because, they're lobbyists or something like that. I don't have the exact number, though I could go and find it.
Yeah. I'm almost concerned. I didn't realize that was that common in the political realm. How, not just with the Conservative Party, but how frequently does that happen overall where people get in, they're not even voted, they don't even have any sort of nomination process? How typical is that?
You typically see it more often within the Liberal Party of Canada, particularly under Justin Trudeau, than you do within the Conservative Party of Canada, because the Conservative Party of Canada has that history. And I would say you would even see it more with the Liberals than you do with the NDP, because the NDP union environment, they like to elect their local people, and rightfully so. It's becoming more common because I think leaders want to have more control. It would be interesting to see what happens. Like, should Mark Carney and the Liberals win this election, which I'm thinking they probably will, for the general federal election and likely to be 2029, it'll be interesting to see how Prime Minister Carney treats that within the Liberal Party of Canada. It's probably a little bit early to tell because this past election, or this election that we're in right now, is not really a good barometer because he just became leader And then a week later, there was the election called the election, and they had a bunch of empty nominations that they had to fill. So a bunch of appointments they had to be made. So it's kind of apples and oranges a little bit. But yeah, like how common, I can't really answer that. Becoming more common, which is why it's important for pro-lifers to go to political party conventions so that you can amend their constitution of the parties so that parties do not have that prerogative and that power to take it further and further away from the leaders and those around the leader and give it more and more and more to the grassroots and local ridings.
Definitely. So my final question for you, kind of piggybacks on that. How do we, as pro-life voters, how do we apply that pressure in between election cycles? How do we get involved in those EDA meetings? How do we get involved in, or like letters to our parliamentarians? What can we do to raise awareness, to apply pressure, regardless of who winds up leading our riding?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of different ways that you can get involved in between the electoral cycles. You can get super involved, and so one of the ways that you mentioned is getting elected to your electoral district association board of directors for the political party that you best identify with. So the annual general meetings where members of the boards of directors for these EDAs, happen typically, in the spring or in the autumn. And if you're going to do that, get a hold of us. We've done it before. We've taken over an entire board. So we make sure that we have our supporters in the riding. They have their memberships up to date. They're attending the AGM. Here's the slate of the pro-lifers we want you to vote for, and they're elected to the EDA board. But once you get to the EDA board, you actually have to do things. So it's not a huge time commitment. It's probably a couple hours a month. You have to help with fundraisers because you want to make sure you have enough money for whoever the candidate is for the party to be spent on the election. You have to make sure that you're maintaining, good relations in the community. You have a couple events throughout the year for the party or the candidate or the MP if you already have an MP there. So that's really important because a lot of that stuff really does help at the local level and does move that 5% that you can move. And MPs and candidates will be very, very grateful to those people on the EDA that do those things. And that gets you as an EDA board member that does things on the EDA more of the ear of that MP or that candidate. So when you share your concerns with them, like, oh, there's this bill coming forward that's going to ban late-term abortion, I think that you should vote for it and here are the reasons why. They're going to take that way more seriously than they are from just random person that's emailing them. Now, random person that's emailing them, if they're one of like thousands, like 2, 3, 4,000 in the riding, they're emailing them on this one issue, they really do pay attention to that. Now, like it or hate it, and I hate it, the fact of the matter is that if we're going to do like an email campaign to an MP to get them to vote a certain way, for our pro-life issue, we have to do more emails than those from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation or one of the gun groups or an environmental group or whatever the case might be. That's just the way that it is. So that's why we as an organization try to build up our list in a riding. So that's something you can do is to help us. By helping us, you help a bunch of other people to also put proper and appropriate pressure or encouragement, wherever the case might be, on a member of parliament or member of the Legislative Assembly in between electoral cycles. Go visit them, make it an appointment. Say, I would like to make a half-hour appointment with you. It could be like in August or something like that when the House of Commons isn't sitting, and say like, yeah, I would like to discuss this issue. It's really important to me because they need to hear from you. So like in terms of like if I were to prioritize efficacy of these various ways to apply either positive pressure or negative pressure depending on your situation, number one is being on the active member of the EDA. Number two is having a sit-down meeting with them. Number three would be a phone call. Number four would be an email that you typed that is in your own words. Way down the list of number five is like a form email, so like one that's already written up for you. Staff members at MPs' offices, they can tell like the first three emails are exactly the same on an issue. They come in and they automatically dismiss them because they say it's super easy for people to just put name, email, phone, send. That's not enough effort in their minds for them to take the issue seriously. A bunch of emails that are similar, they sound similar, but obviously they all wrote them in their own words. They do pay attention to that, and they will start counting, okay, did we get 50? Did we get 500? Did we get 5,000? And the different numbers will affect the way they vote or the way they will take the issue seriously. So though that would be the priority from most efficacious to least efficacious of the things that you can do in the meantime.
All right. What about petitions? Are those, do they have very much sway or kind of?
Like with petitions, you have to get into the several hundreds of thousands when it's presented to the House of Commons for it to be for the issue to take notice. One thing that would be, I would call remarkable, is let's say we were to do a petition drive, right, on let's say late term abortion or something like that, and we get like 1 million people to sign the petition, which would be the largest in the history of Canada, presented to the House of Commons. We can then email different MPs and say, and they can go check, and we can email different MPs and say, oh, by the way, we have 3,128 people in your riding, voters, who signed this petition, just to let you know. And if they say, well, only 50,000 people across the country signed this petition, was presented to the House of Commons, so that doesn't really match up, they're going to say, well, these guys are lying. Or if we say, 30 people in your riding signed this petition, like, oh, what do I care? Like, I won this riding with a couple thousand votes. But if you say like 3,000 people in your riding signed this petition, then they'll say, oh, okay, like, no, I got to pay attention to that. So the best thing about a petition is if you get the numbers that you need, it does become efficacious. It does make people stop and think. But the second most important thing is typically when you sign a petition, is the petition's organized by a specific organization. For example, RightNow. And it'll say at the bottom of all our petitions, by signing this petition, you agree to come into our database. And so petitions are a really great way for us to build up our database. Mm-hmm. And once we have, your contact information and we have, for example, just your postal code, our database system will automatically link you to your federal and provincial ridings. Now we can communicate to you when Diane wants to run for the Liberal nomination and she's a Liberal nominee, to encourage people in the riding to sign up as members of the Liberal Party by a certain date to vote for you, so that you could be the nominee and hopefully win the riding in the next election. That's where the power of petitions really truly shows itself, is the building of the building of an active database.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for answering all of our questions, all of our students' questions. Thank you for your time today and the wisdom and the insight that you've shared. You guys at RightNow, you guys do such incredible and critical work, especially in the political sphere. So I know I speak for Canadians across the country when I say thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done, your time, your commitment, and your dedication to the pro-life cause. Before we close this episode, you have mentioned already, but just review for everyone, how can they get involved? How can they get in touch? How do they follow you? What's their best way?
Yeah, so we're all over online. So our website, www.itstartsrightnow.ca. Please sign up there so you can get our communications. We like to do both text and emails. Mm-hmm. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. I'm told we're on the TikTok. I don't know exactly what that means, but Alyssa's on there doing her thing. So you can get hold of us that way as well. And we use all those platforms to communicate.
All right. And I'll be attaching all of those links. If you're able to send them to me, I'll attach them all into the comments and into the description. So people you look down below the video, you'll find it all there. So there you have it. That's the pro-life movement, the political landscape, and what we are facing as pro-lifers, what we're probably going to be facing for the next 4 years. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, Scott, and thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in. If you guys also want to join the conversation, feel free to leave some comments down below. We look forward to hearing your thoughts, hearing any of your questions. Just please remember to keep it classy, keep it civil. We don't want any sort of aggression happening down in the comments. Let's continue to work together to create a better future for all Canadians. Scott, is there anything else you want to add in?
I thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I so badly want to know what a medium-sized political party is. So next time we can have that discussion and hopefully have some answers.
All right. Yeah. And if anyone has any ideas of what that means, comment below. Have a great rest of your week, and hopefully things pan out well for the election this Monday, isn't it?
This Monday, yeah, in a few days, yeah. All right, thanks so much for your time. Thanks.